Are you interested in seeing how you can feel more safe in your body or in learning more about reconnecting with your body? Well, this video is for you. Today, I thought I would speak a little bit about how we often get disconnected from our body and some of the ways that we can start to kind of reconnect and feel safe again in our body. Now, this video is not just for people who might have experienced trauma, dissociation, or like early problems with attachment and their caregivers, but it's also for people who, are thinkers. Maybe this is like the gifted kid who, all they did was study and work really hard on homework and at the computer. And so they just learn to think, 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 and ignore the body. This is also for people who are athletic and, have been taught to push themselves really hard, to run through injuries, to lift weights through pain, and to just kind of disconnect from the body in that way. So there are so many different ways that we can be taught to detach from the body or to ignore its needs. A lot of medical professionals, for example, they'll work their entire shift in a hospital like without eating or drinking because they can't go to the bathroom, right? So there's things like this, right, culturally where it's accepted and even like praised if you just ignore your body cues and you just drive it like it's an animal that doesn't mean anything to you. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about reconnecting with the body and some of the ways that we see this disconnection. So when we go through trauma, or like a very stressful event, what can happen is this detachment. And the detachment can happen internally, right? Where we get separated from our emotions, our thoughts, our body sensations. It's like there's little interruptions instead of things being woven together in a comprehensive whole, where we're like, I'm thinking this, I'm feeling that. My body is experiencing this. This is what's happening outside. Things kind of get split up and fragmented. That's one way that we see dissociation appearing. Another thing that can happen is this feeling of detachment from the environment, where the environment feels unreal or dreamlike. And, the body itself, we can have a difficult time connecting with the body itself. So some people won't experience pain when they know they're in pain, or, they won't experience like hunger cues and stuff like that. So I wanted to kind of start with this idea of feeling safe in the body and looking at both external safety and internal safety. So a big piece of therapy can be looking at environmental triggers and seeing, how can we work on those? How can we desensitize them so that, for example, if there's someone in your household or, a certain setting that is very triggering to you, like how can we bring down the distress that that trigger causes so that you can navigate your life without having to deal with the same impact of that trigger? And EMDR is one of the ways that we work on triggers. Exposure therapy also has some good ways to work on triggers. Another piece too of safety is if we're having flashbacks or like intrusive thoughts or emotions that we're not really comfortable tolerating. And this can be positive or negative emotions. Some people have a really hard time tolerating positive emotions. Um, it's hard for them to allow themselves to enjoy these positive emotions. So we can work on this kind of stuff in therapy because if we work on tolerating that inner world and work on our relationship to these different aspects of our experience, we can have like more acceptance, less shame, less guilt, less distress over things that are honestly, they can be quite normal, right? Like a lot of us do have shame over some past experiences, but in people who've been through trauma, sometimes that shame becomes very overwhelming. And then being in our body feels less safe because of the shame, right? There's this like invisibility that we want to have, this shrinking down. And so a part of trauma therapy, or therapy in general, can just be seeing like how do we work with these, these emotions? How do we work with these experiences? How do we break these patterns, right? Like what is it doing for you? Like how has it protected you so far, or how has it worked for you so far? And then, finding like different coping skills and strategies to kind of get through those and feel safe again. Something that I like is when we're working with the body, we can actually work with symbols too. And this is a piece of depth psychology, like the kind of Jungian psychodynamic theory that I like. And sometimes we can have dreams about like houses, and the houses are like not safe, or people come in and out whenever they want to, or bad guys are coming in. or vases that like aren't, they're not holding water, they're like leaky, they're cracked, or any kind of vessel or something like that. Sometimes these symbols represent our relationship to our body. Symbol analysis is never simply direct like that, but they can represent our relationship to our body. And working with like these dream images can be a safe way to work on our relationship with our body, like painting it or, like modeling one out of clay. Like if you're having a dream image, right? Like if you dream about a certain vase, you could always model one out of clay or paint it or draw it, or you could write a poem about it. Sometimes when we pay attention to what's coming up around our body and these like kind of safe symbols, it provides a more like regulated way of healing through it, right? It feels safer than working with the literal body, right? We can work with the symbolic representation of the body. Another way that it can feel less threatening to work on embodiment is in therapy, paying attention to our body sensations, like talking about them in session, right? Seeing like what's coming up for you right now. Where do you notice it in your body? What emotion are you feeling? What thought is going along with that? And kind of shifting through these different ways of experiencing things to see, oh, and what happens when we listen? What happens when we notice that sensation? And a lot of times just recognizing the body sensation, naming it, sitting with it, breathing through it, talking about it together. A lot of times it helps bring down the intensity of what we're experiencing and helps us kind of get some clarity. Some of my favorite strategies are things like the body scan exercises can be really helpful, or things like a healing light visualization. In EMDR, they call it a light stream technique, but basically it is like a visualization of a healing light, and then whatever sensations you're holding in your body, and whatever like is distressed and holding. There's some pretty cool ways of working with it. So I like to work with these visualizations too because it can be a good way to work with the body that doesn't feel too overwhelming. But we always ease into it and we do what someone's comfortable with and what they're ready for. Because sometimes being present in the body, it doesn't feel safe. And so we really need to have good strategies and really work together on like that safety piece and stabilization as well. Because if someone's using like substances or, self-harm, or they have an unhealthy relationship with pain or with food, or with numbing out, these things can make it hard to have that safety. And if we really want to have a good relationship with our body, working that stuff out is often a part of it. And so I have here some things about caring for the body. And to me, a big piece about developing safety in the body is learning how to care for your individual body. Everyone's body has different needs, right? And often, like a lot of people who have learned to kind of disconnect from the body, childhood might not have been easy. Some people were sick a lot. And if their body was a source of like pain and discomfort, of course, they learned to kind of like ignore what the body was experiencing. So we really want to look at how do we care for ourselves differently now? Like how do we meet our needs in a way that feels like authentic and stabilizing? Um, because if we disconnect from the body, we also disconnect from a lot of intuition. Like our body can recognize and react to things in a really powerful way. Like, have you ever noticed, like, you trip and fall, but your body's already responding? You don't even have to think about it. It's kind of amazing the intelligence of our body. There's also that like gut instinct, and so I think that part of the beauty of doing this work is we get that back, right? Like when we work on reconnecting with the body, we reconnect with the intelligence of the body and also the pleasure of the body, right? Like actually enjoying, something that tastes really good, or enjoying like the movement, right? Like doing something like dancing, or experiencing a hug from someone that we love, someone that we want to be hugged from. Like actually being able to experience that sensation can be really beautiful and really healing. Um, so I just wanted to say that, like, there are some gifts here on the other side of this work. There's a reason why we do this work. Some of the cues that I think are helpful to respect are things like hunger and thirst cues. Because some people have learned to ignore when they're hungry, ignore when they're thirsty. They just don't listen. They don't respect it. But when we start nurturing that, we start like eating when we're hungry, eating foods that feel nourishing to us. To me, that's a big piece of making our body a home, right? It's like caring for the home, or caring for the animal that is our body, by nurturing it, right? If we're tired, allowing ourselves to rest, knowing when to push through and when to just take a step back. I think that's a big piece of this. Like even with physical pain, some people with chronic pain have been told, okay, like no, you need to push through in these situations, like work through it. So I'm not talking about that. Like I'm not overriding what someone's doctor tells them to do. But I think it is good for us to have a distinguishing like or a discernment of some kind. Like this is when I'm going to push through the pain, and this is when I'm going to dial it back. This is when I'm going to respect my body's limits and just kind of navigating that, learning, what are our limits, right? What feels good, what doesn't feel good, and just kind of honoring that for ourselves. Another thing is like respecting the body's need for touch or for proximity. Like sometimes we just don't want to be touched by people, or, maybe you do, but like a fist bump is good, a handshake is not, a hug is good, but like please stand kind of far away, that kind of thing. It's good to know what are your preferences and to just kind of pay attention to how is my body reacting to stuff, right? It's good to kind of have that awareness because when we start paying attention to that, we can often help decrease like the side effects, right? Like feeling anxious and not knowing why we're anxious. It's like, oh, because I didn't eat, I didn't sleep, and also I made my body go and do all these things my body's not comfortable doing. And also like respecting sensory needs, because sensory needs can play a part in this too, right? Like if we disconnect from our body because the light is too bright, people are making too much noise, we don't like being in crowds. And finally, also just like finding ways to incorporate movement that feels good. That can also be a good way to care for the body. And I just wanted to say that one of the beautiful things about trauma therapy is getting to navigate our relationship to our body, how we feel safe in it, how we can feel safer in it, because the body, it's powerful. And, sometimes our experience with disconnection can be helpful, right? Like if we have to get a shot at the doctor, being able to like numb this part of our body and kind of detach from the pain, that can be really helpful, right? So there are times when we want to disconnect, but it's really nice to, in general, be able to work on that feeling of safety and to navigate those disconnections and reconnections in ways that feel good for us. I hope this was helpful for you. It's meant to be educational, not to replace therapy. Please feel free to like, share, or subscribe. I appreciate you listening. Thank you.